All right, Dad. So you had these things happen in your life at a young age. And so what happened after that?
Well, obviously, we came back home from being summoned and called and realized that my grandfather had passed away. And devastating, obviously, for everybody, as we've already stated. And obviously, changes was happening. For me, it was more so as, in this very house that we're sitting in right now, down that hallway, I had a bedroom, and one Sunday afternoon, we'd gone to church. We'd gone through our normal, everyday Sunday routine. One of our routines was after our dinner, our Sunday dinner, we had to take a nap, get ready to go to church that afternoon. And so we all retired to our rooms, and I didn't have anything to do, so I just started reading the Bible, and then I'm laying in my bed and reading the Bible, and all of a sudden I hear this voice. It says, "Preach my word." And it was such a calming, such a reassuring, such a validating voice. And I thought, well, my parents' room is right next to my room, and they're probably playing a joke and being pranksters today for some reason, which would be very uncommon for them. So I got up and I went over into their door and I tapped on it lightly because I didn't know if they were asleep or not. And my mom says, "Come in, hello." And I opened the door and I said, "Are y'all talking through the wall?" And they said no. And so I went back to my bedroom and laid back down and opened my Bible. I was reading again. I heard the same voice. And I'm thinking, what? They're doing something. What is going on? And so the third time I heard this voice, because I'm just trying to figure out what's happening right now, I heard that same voice say the same three words: "Preach my word." I got up again, went back to my room, to my mom and dad's room, and I said to them, I said, "Are you sure you're not speaking something through the wall?" And my mom said, "No, why?" And I said, "Because I'm hearing these words, preach my word." And she looks at me and she says, "Well, maybe God is talking to you." So, of course, obviously, I go back to my room and now I'm thinking, okay, wow, I didn't know God spoke to you like that. I'd never had that experience before. And so, here I am now 4 years later, and my icon, my mentor, my strength had been taken from me, and I'm in this struggle. And again, we're thinking that, my dad is going to assume that responsibility of the church and begin pastoring that, but it didn't quite work out that way. Actually, what happened was we ended up moving to Bloomington, which is just a 20-mile distance from here, and my dad started pastoring the church there. But he ran into some health issues in his own life. He was bivocational. He was still working and pastoring the church at the same time. He resigned the church. We moved back here to Seadrift, moved back into this house, and really just began to seek God for what we were to do next. And during that time, my oldest sister found this guy who was living in San Antonio at the time. And then so Cindy, my oldest sister, and he started dating. And then shortly after that, they got married and moved to San Antonio. So we as a family would go to San Antonio on weekends and visit, her and him, and go to a church there called Glory Bound Baptist Church, which they were attending at the time. And something happened in that little small church too, there in San Antonio, and I think it's a good thing. So I'll let you tell the story of how I came from Seadrift to San Antonio.
He was so shy.
And
Such a shy guy.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was not very outgoing, especially in the girl department at that time.
I really don't remember you until we met the first time, which was at the revival. So if you'd come before, I don't know. But maybe it was that fancy jacket you were wearing. Do you remember? Seriously, we had a revival happening at the church that I grew up in, and it's actually the church that I got saved in when I was just 9 years old, and you know, kind of got interested in playing the piano and self-taught, you know, myself how to play the piano, and so very quickly I started playing in the church. I mean, I think I was 10 years old when I started playing piano. And so at this revival, now I'm 15, and this family comes because your dad actually, y'all had been going because didn't your dad hold that revival?
He did, yeah.
So I guess that's the first time you came with and participated. Like,
Right.
Because I played piano, and so now we had a bass player. And so I remember him coming in and setting up his bass on the front row of the church. And I looked over and I was like, who's this? You know? So I guess I just never noticed you before. But
Yeah.
but he had on this black and white check plaid jacket. I mean, it was fancy. And I just was like, wow, who's this guy? He had long hair, because down here, that was kind of the surfer style. Mm-hmm. And I was used to East Central Cowboys, kickers, you know? And so I was like, who's this dude? Because he had this long hair and it kind of flipped, you know? And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So anyway, so I was playing piano, and so I had to tell him, you know, what key we were in. If we were in C or G or F, you know, I would tell him the keys that we were moving to so that he could play along. I don't remember if there were guitar players. I don't know if it was just you and I playing.
I don't remember everybody there. I think, of course, my dad, when he was there,
Maybe your dad was
he
playing
was
along.
playing along too, I think.
Maybe, yeah. So it was the first time our church really had extra instruments, honestly. It was usually just me, I think, in the past. So very quickly, y'all were up for the week, because I remember you started coming more.
Yeah.
Because where we really actually started, like, beginning of a relationship it was a youth night, and I think it was that same week.
I believe it was.
Yeah. And so that Wednesday night, I think I invited you. I was like, hey, Wednesday night, the youth group is all going to see Jesus Christ Superstar. It's the first time it came out. And so we invited you to come to the church to meet the youth group, and we were going to go. And so we got there, and we were all choosing what cars we were going to go in. And so I made sure that I was like, well, me and my friend June, we're going to ride with Steve. And so we went over to get in the car, and my friend June jumped in the front seat. And I got in the back seat. But June had a plan, but we laugh about this. She's a friend of mine. But anyway, we laugh because the whole time in the car we're driving, she thinks she won because she got in the front seat. But I had his eye in the rearview mirror. So the whole, I was like smiling and talk like every time he looked in that rearview mirror, I was flirting with him in the rearview mirror. So when we got to we went to the movie and left there and went over to our youth pastor's house where they lived. It was an apartment, actually.
Right.
And there was a swimming pool. And so we all were hanging out around the pool. And so I decided it was really important that I let him know that I was interested. Mm-hmm. So I did a map on a piece of paper, because back then we didn't have GPS or anything like that. So, and we didn't have cell phones. So I got my address, my name, and my phone number, and I drew a GPS map. Like, I drew where we were and the road you would take and where you would turn. And so he was sitting on the other side of the pool, just being all like, cool dude. And so I walked over there. You were being like, he was like leaned back, you're like so cool on the lounge chair there at the pool. And so, but mind you, I had another boyfriend there. Yes, I'm sorry to say that, I did. But we were kind of dating. So I made sure, and I went over and I said, hey.
You probably had more than one there. You just didn't know it.
if you have time this week, you could give me a call and you can come by the house. Here's a map to my house. And I handed it to him.
No, I didn't call right away.
He waited a few days and then he called. And he came over to visit at the house. And what was so funny, my mom and I laughed about it for years and years and years. Because, like, if you walked to the front door, there was a chair sitting right at the front door.
I'm still sitting there, actually.
Probably. And he walked in the door when he got there. And he walked in, he sat in the chair, never moved. Mom and I sat there and talked to him. And the minute my mom said, well, your dad's going to be home in a few minutes, he, like, literally, like, okay, I got to go. He got up and left.
Yeah, I didn't want to overload y'all too much.
So, anyway, that was the first time. And so after that, I don't know, I guess you had to go back home eventually because this was summer before my junior year. So I was 15 and you were, what, 17?
17.
Summer before his senior year. So when summer ended, you went back home. But we continued to talk. Nana probably doesn't know, or she might know. But we used to call each other on the phone and we wouldn't hang up. So was it a long distance phone call? Might have been back in that day.
Yeah.
You may have had to pay some bills, did you?
No, they never made me pay the bills. They just told me about them.
So we just started that long distance relationship. And so when he graduated his senior year is when he moved down to San Antonio to move in with his sister. So he'd be in San Antonio. So that's really where, we started dating, I would say,
Yeah.
on a regular basis. And we got married. The joke is I asked him to marry me. I said, well, we've been together for a while, so I mean, are we going to get married, right?
Underneath the mesquite tree.
Yes.
It was where she proposed to me.
We discussed it. We came to a conclusion. So anyway, we didn't ever have like a formal "Will you marry me?" It was kind of like, well, yeah. So because we started dating and then we decided to get married, it was just very natural that we would stay in the church that I had grown up in and that you had started going to because your sister went there. Mm-hmm. So we went to that church and we're in the youth group. And through my senior year, we had always been active in the youth group. And when he would come up, he would hang out with us. So it was just very natural when we got married that we just continued ministering in the youth group there at the church.
Yeah, how old were y'all when you got married?
I was almost 18.
Almost?
Yes. We were going to wait till I turned 18 to get married, but we got moved up a couple of months. I was 17, actually, and Pastor was 19.
19, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's very young. So after we got married, we continued in ministry there, helping. And then whenever you felt like you really wanted to fulfill the call that God had on your life is whenever we made the decision to start attending First Assembly in San Antonio.
Yeah, we had been involved at First Assembly of God. We did whenever I decided and then went to you and said, hey, I think it's time that I really start pursuing ministry as a full-time obligation and commitment to God. I said, I think I'm going to have to go really back to the roots of where everything started for me, and that was out of the Assembly of God Church. And so we moved over to First Assembly of God Church. It was located on Military Drive at the time, and started really serving there pretty quick. You were 6 months pregnant with Brandon at the time that we got there. And soon after we had Brandon, you had him. I was there, but that was a tough one. But we started teaching the high school Sunday school class. Well, at least you did.
But we taught it for 1 week together.
1 week together. And then the pastor came to me and said, hey, I need what at that day and time was called a Christian education director. And would you be willing to take on that responsibility? And so you then continued to teach the high school Sunday school class. I took over the Christian education department there for First Assembly. and we actually ministered there together for 16 years. God really began to call us out of that. The church moved from a south side location to a north side location, and once that kind of happened, we really felt that pull that it was our turn to really start doing everything that God had called us to do in ministry and pastoring. And so that was the big leap of faith, I think, in our lives, because we had never done anything like this before. It meant committing, because I guess one of the greatest fears of my life is failure in something, failure in not being able to fulfill, especially in the things spiritually in your life, what God has been so faithful to do in you, and you want to return that. And so we kind of prayed about it. We just kept seeking God, and we just felt like we were to start a church on southeast side of San Antonio. And
I think that in that story, what you're saying is whenever you expressed to me that all those years, it was difficult for you, because from the time you were called until we started, together and making that decision of moving to First Assembly so that you could prepare to go into ministry, there was a lot of years. I mean, we're talking, we had Brandon was in my stomach to be born, and you did not surrender until he was 16 years old.
Right.
So there's a long time that went on before that happened. I remember talking to you about that the reason was for fear of failure. Yeah. I was like shocked because we're opposite personalities. I don't have fear of failure. It does not exist in me. So I never understood that it was so difficult for you, to take the steps, because I was all ready and you were like, wait a second, So that was 16 years. That's a long time. And during that process, after each son being born and the responsibilities and, life going on. And I remember there was that season of understanding that God had put us there as high school Sunday school teacher. And all those years we worked with the high school kids.
Right.
I mean, Sunday school, I taught them all the way through, and we were still youth sponsors there.
Yeah.
So we were very youth oriented. That's what we were all about. And so the thing that I think is so important to know and to understand about the boys is that we were all about ministry. Everything that we did, even though we had jobs and to provide, church was 3 or 4 times a week.
At least.
We didn't miss for any reason. And that meant being at church, like for a while, Christian education, that's Sunday school. We had to be at the church with the church doors. You had the key to open the church.
Yep.
All 4 of us, all 4 of the sons and us, like by 8 o'clock in the morning. And they used to tease about how did I dress the boys at night and put them in bed, because we have to be there so early. But the thing I wanted to talk about is that season where the Lord really called our family to faith, that we would be in ministry, to take the steps, was that I went through a season where I just felt like every Sunday I was in the altar just seeking God and just crying and weeping before him. And there were some Sundays they would even leave me behind and they would go to dinner or go to lunch, all my friends, and they'd be walking by me and I'd be at the altar crying and they'd be like, Melissa, are you okay? And I'd be like, I'm fine. I just can't stop crying, And that went on, and I'd be fine during the week, but then Sunday would come and I'd be like, God, is this going to happen again this Sunday? And it did. It went on for 6 weeks until the Sunday that a word was spoken over me that God has seen your heart's cry. And I'm like, wow, I'm glad I'm hearing this, because I was just crying and didn't really know why. I just knew God was doing something.
Right.
Was that my sons would be preachers of the word.
Right.
They would be mighty men of God and preachers of the word, not just the milk of the word. They'd be preachers of the meat of the word.
Yeah.
And I got up that Sunday and was like, okay, that's what it is. I'm going to be a mom that's going to lead men into faith to become ministers. And that was just huge.
Hey.
What's up, brothers? Brothers from the same mother. Questionable on the dad.
All right. All right. Well, welcome, brothers. We're known as the B Brothers, B Boys.
What's up?
The original Backstreet Boys.
The original.
Bronson's Lance.
Doesn't sound good.
Bronson's Lance.
All right. So, Brandon, you were talking about, you were saying about the good old days, the glory days, 1997. I mean, just take us back there. What was your go-to outfit at that time? Like, what did you look like?
Man, go-to outfit, probably like some boot-cut Jabot jeans, Tommy Hilfiger on top. You know what I'm saying? Few little Vanilla Ice lines in the eyebrow. Yeah. You know, every once in a while, I'll do a little frosted tips. You know, like Ricky Martin. But yeah, that was it. Some polo boots. Brent knows about those polo boots.
Polo boots.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Timberland.
Okay.
Rocking the Timberland.
Doc Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What were we
Jabot
wearing? What did we
jeans.
smell like?
Ooh, nautical.
My
Nautical
go-to
was
was Aquadigio.
Aquadigio.
You can still get it now. HEB, $12.99.
Yeah, exactly.
Solid scent.
All right, Brent, 1997.
1997, figuring life out. I was in 8th grade.
Figuring life out in
Solid.
8th grade.
Yeah, trying to figure out life, praying for my wife, stuff like that.
That's right. You met Heather 8th grade.
Met Heather in 8th grade. Life was really coming together at 8th grade while I was trying to figure myself out. But no, it was an interesting time.
And Brian, you were 6th grade?
No, I was 7th.
You were 7th.
Yeah, Heritage. He was first 8th grade. I was the first
Seventh,
7th
yeah.
grade class of
I didn't think
Heritage.
you were 2 years behind him.
Shout out to my Hurricanes. You're out there. But yeah, I think for me, it was so early on. I think I just remember not wanting to go to church back in 7th grade. I was like, we're going again. Like, obviously we grew up and we went to church all the time.
The most fondest memories are inside of the house with like a whole bunch of passionate people. And back then it was like, oh, what are we doing? Like the same thing again. There was like really cool moments of worship, and we were pulling out like, I don't think we had tambourines, but we had bongos and guitars and people just singing whatever. And I can look back and still hear the sounds of people passionate about Jesus, you know?
That's exactly what they were doing in those moments. It's like cultivating this community of people that are, gathered for one purpose under one name. And it's amazing, like, to look back and now at those moments as kids, just going like, hey, this is cool and this is fun, or this is weird. What are we doing? Like, why are people
really
sleeping
cool
on our
moments,
couch? It's 2 a.m. Like, I just got home from a football game, and it's like, well, so-and-so and her husband had a fight, and so she's sleeping over, and that was normal for us, but that was part of that community that was being cultivated. And I think, looking back, it's amazing to see what a group of people, who are gathered under one name for one purpose can accomplish. I realized how essential those moments were for me, right? Understanding the power of community and gathering people, in starting our church, and I'm sure Brent's the same way. It's like we learned so many lessons in those early years. Like, we didn't even know, we didn't even know we were in
Learning,
school.
yeah.
But Mom and Dad took us to class, like, just,
Week in, week out.
What to do, what not to do. As much as we could talk about the beauty of what Mom and Dad created and pioneered, the beauty of what is today and the launching of churches out of what is today. But it didn't come without pain. It didn't come without sacrifice. It didn't come without criticism. It didn't come without false accusations, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Mom and Dad walked through it with individuals that, said things, did things, were all in at one moment in time, and then the next season were
saying interesting things about mom and dad and them having to navigate that. But looking at it, mom and dad walked through all of those seasons, and we learned from their pain. We learned from their sacrifice. We learned from their frustrations. Not that we don't have our own, but it looks different. And that's why as a pastor, I say we stand on the backs of giants. It's the reality of what we have here today is the beauty of the sacrifices that has gone generations before us has laid a foundation and dredged a road of that has really set us up for success. So we stand on their backs. They're giants in the faith. Though it may be small beginnings, though it may be humble beginnings, as the word tells us, we don't despise those days. And if we're wise, we're gonna appreciate those days. And I think for us as sons, that's what we have done, is we can see the pain, the sacrifice, the frustration, all of it, and say thank you. But take hold of our callings and run with what God has placed inside of our hands, and see people know Jesus.
I think I want to bring clarity to what you're saying too, though, because I think when people hear that, sometimes they might just think only like the fact that mom and dad started a church, right? That's not the only sacrifice. Like, I look back at mom and dad even before church and going, mom and dad constantly were the type of people that were convicted by God, responded to the Holy Spirit, and lived faith-filled lives. And I think that when people just go, wow, well, that your parents started a church and that just made it easy for you guys to start. No, it's not the only thing. It's like all that time in their early years of marriage, raising us and then serving in the church and doing what they did. God was, like I said it yesterday, or I said it in the promo in the Philippians 1:6, have confidence in the fact that when God starts a good work, he's faithful and he will complete it. And I think that good work, this good work we're sitting in today has been, back to generations, but we all have a choice. Like, I have a choice right now to face my issues so that my generations that are following me, can stand on the back of me, right? And that's what I'm striving for. But for clarity on that, man, the lifestyle that mom and dad lived was so compelling for us as we got older, that now that I look back at it, I go, man, I want that. Like, I want to live that kind of life where my house is your house. Come in, and if you need help, I'm willing to help you. And me and Jacqueline are working on that. We're figuring all that out. But I think they modeled for us such a beautiful lifestyle, and I think it modeled how Jesus lived.
So, Brandon, you were saying about the good old days, the glory days, 1997. Just take us back there. What was life like? FCA, fifth quarters. Man, it was good.
Yeah, I think it was it was an exciting time. Like you said, mom and dad had started FCA at East Central, and naturally that kind of as an athlete, that kind of thrust me into a role of like embracing Jesus, getting into the schools and in the community, and so the fifth quarters were cool after games. Like I was saying, there was really nobody out there, especially when we were growing up, there was nobody out there that was doing church that you wanted to go to or even invite, much less invite somebody to. So I know FCA was a huge first step for mom and dad, and kind of just like getting into the community and getting their feet wet. And so, it was a fun time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the family had grown so much. We had the 4 boys, and with having boys, we definitely were involved with a lot of sports. Well, they were.
Every sport.
Played every sport, it seemed like. And so that got us out in the community, meeting a lot of the parents and
coaches.
And then Brandon's high school years, he was brought up his sophomore year to start preparing to be the quarterback, and he quarterbacked his junior and senior year, and that really got us connected with people through Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
I think it was actually one of the suggestions of the coaches that we kind of take over the role and responsibility for Fellowship of Christian Athletes on the campus there at East Central, and we started that in just a little classroom.
Right.
And we'd have probably 10, 15, 20 kids coming in. I think some of them were just trying to hide away from the big crowd or whatever. But we were bringing food too, so that was kind of a draw. And we were leaving our offices and during that lunch hour, traveling across town and ending up there just to do that for them. But we saw a need in there. And as we continued just to love on the kids,
It grew, right?
it grew.
Yeah.
It grew to the point to where we moved it over to the practice gym, and we had 150 kids on a Thursday during lunch coming in, and we were just loving on them, sharing the love of Jesus that he had for them in their lives. And it was something that they gravitated to and began to just respond to. And we kind of knew that something was there that we needed to continue to look at. We were also doing things for them on different and like
Yeah,
off weekends.
right.
We'd put games together and just bring them together. And
Like with Texas Pride, remember?
Yep.
We Texas Pride catered one of our events, and
Yep,
we
yep.
did a cowboy obstacle course.
Yep,
and
right.
invited kids from the community to come, and it was
we
like,
put
it
some
was
of
a big
those
deal.
kids in of course we call them kids, they were young teenagers in these big tractor tires. And then the teams had to roll them
Yeah,
down
competition,
the
yeah.
football field.
Yeah.
It was a practice field; it wasn't the real field.
Yeah.
And some of those kids were getting sick, and
Yeah.
all kinds of things happening there. But we were having a lot of fun
Yeah.
doing that. But also at the same time, we recognized that there was a spiritual need in that community,
Right.
and that was the reason why we felt like God had placed us in the southeast side of San Antonio. It was such a pivotal moment for us because we wanted to make sure the next generation had the same experiences that we had had in our lives growing up
For the community that we were in.
in the
Yeah.
community that we're in. So it was part of God's plan, but did we really know? Did we really know? What the big plan was? No. We knew we wanted to give it to our sons and our family, but did we know that God had a bigger plan and a bigger dream?
Oh my gosh, you're just like,
And you want to cry and I want to cry, but that's because when you're in the moment, you don't see it. You don't understand it. But it goes back to those beginning days in your life when you were 9 years old and you went to Vacation Bible School and God then led you to lead your family. And when God spoke to me in that room at 9 years old, preached my word, and you were at an altar for weeks praying for our children, and God spoke to you and said, they will be preachers not of the milk of the word, but of the meat of the word. And that was the confirmation that we needed in our lives. And we just continue to walk in faith, watching and waiting for God to open the doors. And he was always faithful. And he will always be faithful, because that's who God is. So we knew he was beginning something in us.